The mountains don't care about your story. They stand silent, indifferent, watching the lives below unfold with the patience of stone that has seen 10,000 winters and will see 10,000 more. The Rockies rise around Ashwood, Montana like cathedral walls, their peaks dusted white. Even in October, their slopes thick with lodgepole pine that smell like earth and resin and something older than memory. This is a town that exists in the margins. Population 3,200 on a good day less when the young people leave for Billings or Missoula or anywhere with a future that doesn't smell like sawdust and regret. Main Street runs 4 blocks anchored by a hardware store that's been in the same family since 1947, a barber shop with a pole that hasn't spun since the motor died in 2003, and a white-painted Baptist church with a bell that rings at 6 every morning, calling the faithful to a God who may or may not be listening. Riley's Diner sits where Route 89 meets the two-lane county road that leads everywhere else. It's a squat building with aluminum siding, gone the color of old teeth, a flat roof that leaks when it rains hard, and a neon sign that buzzes open 24 hours in angry pink light. The second O flickers like a dying heartbeat. Inside the floor is checkered linoleum, black and white squares, scuffed gray by decades of boots. Red vinyl booths line the windows, their seats cracked and splitting, foam padding showing through like exposed bone. The air always smells the same burnt coffee industrial cleaner and the permanent ghost of bacon grease that has seeped into the walls. The ceiling tiles, the very molecular structure of the building. This is where Caleb Morrison works 4 nights a week from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, making $7.50 an hour, plus whatever tips the insomniacs and long-haul truckers leave behind, which is almost never more than loose change and silence. He is 17 years old and he has been invisible his entire life. Not in any supernatural sense, in the worst sense. The kind where people look right through you like you're a window. They're trying to see past, like your wallpaper in a room they've stopped noticing, like your background music that fades into static the moment they start thinking about anything else. Caleb is tall, just over 6 feet, but he carries himself like someone trying to take up less space. Shoulders slightly hunched, head slightly down, moving through the world with the apologetic posture of a person who has learned that invisibility is safer than attention. His hair is dark brown, shaggy falling past his eyebrows in a curtain he hides behind. His clothes are thrift store functional flannel shirts over white undershirts, jeans with frayed hems, sneakers with holes near the toes that he's patched with duct tape on the inside so people won't see. His hands smell permanently of fryer grease and industrial dish soap. His voice is quiet, soft around the edges, the voice of someone who has been told too many times to speak up and has decided it's easier not to speak at all. He has kind eyes the color of creek water in late summer, but most people never look long enough to notice. His mother is Diane Morrison, 43 years old and looks 50. She is small, barely 5'2", with dark hair going gray at the temples and hands rubbed raw from years of work that never stops. She holds 2 jobs. Nights she works hospital laundry at Ashwood County Medical, feeding sheets and towels into machines that hiss and rumble through the dark hours, breathing in bleach fumes that burn her throat and make her eyes water. Days she cleans houses on the east side of town, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors for families who leave cash on the kitchen counter and never learn her last name. She raised Caleb alone since he was 9 years old. Since the morning his father walked into the garage, closed the door, started the Mustang, and decided that the carbon monoxide was kinder than one more day of living inside a mind that had turned against him. Michael Morrison, 34 years old, Army Infantry, 2 tours in Afghanistan, Purple Heart Bronze Star, and a diagnosis of PTSD that the VA said would get better with time and therapy, and medications that made him feel like he was watching his own life through frosted glass. It didn't get better. Diane found him slumped over the steering wheel, the garage thick with exhaust, the radio still playing some country station he'd loved. She screamed until the neighbors came. She held Caleb, 9 years old and shaking, and told him the lie that would define the next 8 years of his life. Daddy's sick. He had to go away to get better. He'll come back when he's ready. The sheriff knew the truth. The coroner knew. The neighbors suspected. But in a town like Ashwood, some lies are kinder than the truth. And Diane Morrison had earned the right to grieve in whatever way kept her son from drowning in the same darkness that had taken his father. The Mustang stayed in the driveway. A 1967 fastback Acapulco Blue with a blown head gasket and a transmission that had given up the ghost sometime during Michael's final year. It sat there like a monument, like a promise, like a question Caleb couldn't stop trying to answer. Every Saturday morning, rain or shine, snow or heat, Caleb is in the driveway with a socket wrench and a Haynes manual he bought at a yard sale for $3. He pulls the engine apart, piece by piece, lays the components on old bed sheets like a surgeon organizing organs, and tries to understand the language of machinery, the logic of combustion, the alchemy that turns gasoline and air and spark into forward motion. The neighbors think it's a hobby. Diane knows it's something else. Caleb knows the truth. Neither of them will say out loud he believes in some deep irrational corner of his 17-year-old heart that if he can fix the car, he can fix everything. That if the engine turns over, maybe the world will turn over too. Maybe the hole his father left behind will fill in like a pothole patched with fresh asphalt. Maybe his mother will stop working herself to death. Maybe the house will stop feeling like a place where someone important is missing. The engine has never turned over, but every Saturday he tries again. Because Caleb Morrison doesn't know how to quit on something, even when the something quit on him a long time ago. It's Tuesday night, October 15th, and the diner is as empty as a church on a weekday. One customer, Earl Kowalski, 72, retired postal worker, sitting in his usual booth near the window, working on a slice of cherry pie and a cup of coffee he'll nurse for 2 hours. Earl comes in every Tuesday, orders the same thing, leaves a $1 tip, and never says more than 10 words. Caleb doesn't mind. Silence is easier than conversation. Conversation requires you to be seen. He's behind the counter wiping down surfaces that are already clean when the bell above the door chimes. It's 11:47 at night. The girl who walks in looks wrong for this place, wrong for this town, wrong for this time of night, in a way that makes Caleb's instincts prickle with a warning he doesn't fully understand. She's young, maybe 16, with short dark hair that looks like it was cut in a hurry, uneven around the edges, choppy in a way that suggests scissors wielded in a gas station bathroom rather than a salon. She wears a leather jacket at least 2 sizes too big, the sleeves hanging past her knuckles, battered black combat boots dark with rain, and she carries a black duffel bag over one shoulder that pulls her frame to one side with a weight that seems too heavy for someone so small. But it's her eyes that stop him. Storm cloud blue, sharp, alert. They move across the room with a precision that's almost military, scanning the corners, the exits, the old man in the booth, the hallway to the restrooms. She catalogs everything in 2 seconds flat, the way someone does when they've been trained or when they've been hunted. Sloan Blackwood is 16 years old and she's been running for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she walked out of a life most people would kill for and most people would never understand. Her father is Magnus Blackwood. They call him Iron Jaw. He is the founding president of the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club, a man who commands an army of riders spread across 11 Western states who can make a single phone call and have 50 men appear at a location with no questions asked, who has built an empire on the principles of loyalty, brotherhood, and a code of silence that is enforced with the kind of finality that doesn't require courtrooms. He is 6'4" with a beard like steel wool and arms thick as fence posts covered in ink that tells stories of roads traveled and debts paid and blood spilled in the service of men who would die for him without hesitation. He is rich, powerful, feared in some circles and respected in all of them. He gave Sloan everything a girl could want. Everything except a choice. Sloan didn't want the leather. She didn't want the clubhouse with its stale smoke and its whispered conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. She didn't want the armed escorts to school the way her classmates looked at her with a mixture of fascination and terror, the way teachers never called on her because calling on Magnus Blackwood's daughter might bring trouble no one wanted. She didn't want to be a chess piece in a game she hadn't chosen to play. She wanted to be ordinary. She wanted to walk into a room and be nobody's daughter, nobody's leverage, nobody's responsibility. She wanted to choose her own life, whatever that looked like, even if it looked like nothing. So she left. She packed a bag at 4 in the morning while her father slept in the room down the hall, unaware that the most important thing in his world was slipping out the back door with $1,400 in savings and a one-way Greyhound ticket to nowhere in particular. She ditched her phone in a trash can in Sacramento. She cut her hair in a gas station bathroom in Redding, watching the dark strands fall into the sink like pieces of the life she was leaving behind. She bought new clothes at a Goodwill in Bend. She ate vending machine crackers and slept in bus station chairs and tried to become nobody. But 3 days ago at a Greyhound stop in Spokane, she made a mistake that changed everything. She grabbed the wrong bag. It was a simple error. The bags looked identical. Black nylon duffel, no name tag, the kind of generic luggage that 1,000 travelers carry through 1,000 bus stations every single day. She slung it over her shoulder and walked off the bus without a second thought, her mind already on the next leg of the journey, the next cheap motel, the next step in her disappearance. It wasn't until she was 2 hours south, sitting in the back of a pickup truck, driven by a rancher who'd offered her a ride, that she unzipped the bag and looked inside. It wasn't her clothes. It wasn't her copy of East of Eden, or her toothbrush, or the photograph of her and her father from when she was 6 years old before everything got complicated. Inside were bundles of cake, $50,000 rubber banded in stacks of hundreds. And beneath the cash, wrapped in a plastic freezer bag and taped to the lining of the duffel, a small black USB drive. Sloan stared at it for a long time. Her hands began to shake. She knew with the instinct of a girl who had grown up in the shadow of the outlaw world, who had seen men pass envelopes under tables and speak in codes she was never supposed to understand, that she was holding something dangerous. She didn't plug in the drive. She didn't count the money. She zipped the bag shut, got out of the truck at the next gas station, and tried to think. The smart thing would be to leave the bag, walk away, let someone else deal with whatever dark gravity lived inside that black nylon shell. But if someone was looking for this bag, They would trace the Greyhound manifest. They would find the rancher. They would follow the trail of a girl with short hair and a leather jacket, and they would find her. The only way to stay safe was to keep moving and figure out what she was carrying so she could figure out how to give it back without ending up in a shallow grave. That's how Sloan Blackwood ended up in Ashwood, Montana at 11:30 on a Tuesday night with a flat tire, $23, and absolutely no one in the world she could call. Her set-in, a $1,500 beater she'd bought with cash in Spokane, had blown a tire on Route 89 coming into town. She'd limped into the parking lot of the only place with lights still on the neon buzz of Riley's Diner, cutting through the rain like a lighthouse in a storm. She sits in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, watching the rain streak the windshield. She can see the warm yellow glow of the diner interior through the smeared glass. A figure moves behind the counter. One old man sits in a booth methodically eating pie. She looks at the duffel bag on the passenger seat. She looks at the flat tire. She looks at the $23 in her wallet. Then she pulls the hood of her jacket over her head, grabs the bag, and walks into the diner. The bell above the door chimes with a tired little jingle. Caleb looks up from the counter. His name tag says Caleb in faded letters. He's wiping down the already clean surface with a rag that looks like it needs washing more than the counter does. The girl slides into a booth near the back, positioning herself so she can see both the front door and the hallway to the restrooms. She sets the duffel bag on the seat beside her, one hand resting on it, like she's protecting something precious or something deadly. She doesn't take off her jacket. Caleb walks over with a menu and a glass of water. The menu is laminated and sticky edges curling with age. Coffee, the girl says, her voice is quiet but steady. Black, and fries if you have them. We always have fries, Caleb says. He pauses. She's not looking at him. She's watching the parking lot through the window, watching the rain come down in sheets that blur the world beyond the glass. Rough night, he asks. It's the most he's said to a customer in weeks. He's not sure why he said it. Maybe because she looks the way he feels most days. Alone. Tired. A long way from anywhere that matters. The girl looks up at him. For a second, something shifts behind those guarded eyes, a flicker of surprise maybe, or recognition. The recognition of one invisible person seeing another. Just passing through, she says. But she's not just passing through. Caleb can see the flat tire from the window, the sedan sitting crooked in the parking lot like a wounded animal listing to one side. He doesn't push it. He goes back to the counter, pours coffee, black no sugar, and drops a basket of fries into the fryer. The oil sizzles and pops, a sound as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. For a few minutes, the diner exists in its usual state of quiet suspension. Rain on the roof, hum of the refrigerator, sizzle of the fryer. Earl turns a page of his newspaper. The clock on the wall ticks its slow, steady rhythm. The world outside is dark and wet, and the world inside is warm and small. And for those few minutes, nothing bad can reach them. Caleb brings the girl her coffee and fries. She wraps both hands around the mug like she's trying to absorb warmth through her skin, like she hasn't been warm in a very long time. Your tire's flat, Caleb says, setting down the fries. I know. I've got a jack in the back. I could take a look when my shift ends if you want. The girl really looks at him for the first time. She studies his face with those careful eyes reading him, the way she's been taught to read people, looking for the angle, the motive, the hidden agenda. He's skinny, a little awkward, Kind eyes behind all that hair. He's offering to help a stranger at midnight in the rain, and he's doing it because he doesn't know how not to. There's no angle. There's no motive. He's just a boy who saw someone who needed help and couldn't look the other way. You don't have to do that, she says. I know, Caleb says, and he almost smiles. It's a small thing, barely a twitch at the corner of his mouth, but it's real. He goes back behind the counter. Sloan eats her fries, slowly sipping her coffee. For the first time in 3 weeks, the knot in her chest loosens just slightly. There's something about this place, this sad little diner in this forgotten town, this boy with his quiet kindness, that makes her feel like she can breathe. That feeling lasts exactly 4 minutes. The bell above the door chimes again, and the air in the diner changes. It's not a sound. It's a shift, like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm, like the moment before lightning strikes, when every hair on your body stands on end and the air tastes like copper. Sloan feels it before she sees it. Her hand moves instinctively to the duffel bag. 4 men walk in. They're not locals. That's immediately obvious. They're older, mid-20s, wearing expensive streetwear that looks absurdly out of place in a diner that smells like burnt coffee and desperation. Two of them are thick, heavy-set, with the flat-eyed look of men who've done ugly things and will do them again without hesitation. The third is wiry and twitchy, his eyes darting around the room like a rat looking for an exit. But it's the fourth man who makes Sloane's blood turn to ice. He's lean with sharp cheekbones and a tattoo of a scorpion crawling up the side of his neck, its tail curving behind his ear like it's about to strike. His eyes are dead, not angry, not cruel, just empty, like a shark's eyes, like looking into two holes where a soul should have been. He moves with lazy confidence, hands in the pockets of his black jacket, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. The smirk of a man who enjoys fear the way some people enjoy music. His name is Rafferty. He spots Sloan immediately. His smirk widens into something that has none of a smile's warmth. Well, well, his voice is slick in mocking, the kind of voice that inflicts fear casually, like some people inflict bruises. The little runaway princess. Sloan doesn't scream. She doesn't run. She's been raised in a world where fear is a weapon, and showing it is the same as handing someone a loaded gun. She sets her coffee down slowly and grips the edge of the table until her knuckles go white. "Leave me alone, Rafferty." Her voice is flat, controlled. "I told you people I'm done." "You don't get to be done, sweetheart." Rafferty steps closer. The other 3 men fan out behind him, blocking the path to the front door. The wiry one moves to the hallway, cutting off the back exit. "You took something that doesn't belong to you. My employer is very unhappy. He wants the bag, and he wants you in a car right now." Sloane's mind races. They found her. Somehow, despite the ditched phone, the cut hair, the cash purchases, the careful avoidance of cameras, they found her in 3 weeks across 4 states to a diner in a town nobody's ever heard of. That's not luck. That's not just resources. That's information. Someone told them where she was. She speaks loudly, making sure Earl in the corner can hear every word. "I grabbed the wrong bag at the bus station. It was an accident. I'll give it back, but I'm not getting in a car with you." "That's not how this works," Rafferty says. "Then we have a problem because there's an old man right there with a phone and the police station is 5 minutes away. You want to add kidnapping to whatever your boss is already wanted for. It's a calculated bluff." She doesn't know if Ashwood even has a police station, But she's buying seconds, stretching the moment, her eyes flicking to Earl in the corner. The old man has stopped eating his pie. He's watching, his weathered face tight with alarm, one gnarled hand already reaching into his coat pocket for his phone. Rafferty's dead eyes narrow. He's not used to resistance. He's especially not used to it from a teenage girl. Last chance, princess. Get up, bring the bag, walk out that door or this gets ugly. Sloan stares at him. She doesn't move. No, she says. The word hangs in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Rafferty's hand shoots forward. He grabs Sloane's wrist across the table, his fingers digging into her skin, with a grip that feels like a vice made of bone. He yanks her forward, pulling her half out of the booth. Pain lances up her arm. Her coffee cup topples, spilling across the table in a dark flood. Wasn't asking, he hisses. Behind the counter, Caleb Morrison stops breathing. He's watched the whole thing unfold with a growing dread that started in his stomach and climbed into his throat like something alive. He knows he should stay out of it. These men are dangerous. Clearly dangerous. The kind of dangerous that doesn't exist in Ashwood, that comes from a world Caleb has only seen in movies and news reports. The smart thing, the safe thing, is to duck into the back office, call 911, and hide until the police arrive. That's what any reasonable person would do. That's what his mother would want him to do. Stay safe, Caleb. Don't be a hero. Heroes end up in hospitals. But then he sees Rafferty grab her wrist. He sees the pain flash across her face, quickly smothered, because she's too proud or too stubborn to give Rafferty the satisfaction. And he sees her eyes. It's not just fear. It's the look of someone who knows with cold certainty that if she walks out that door, she's never coming back. It's the look of someone about to vanish. Caleb Morrison doesn't think. He doesn't calculate the odds. He doesn't weigh the risks or consider the consequences. He doesn't ask himself whether this is smart or brave or stupid. He just moves. He vaults over the counter. It's a move he's imagined 100 times during long, boring shifts. Hands on the formica, swing the legs over, land on the other side. He's never actually done it before. His sneaker catches the edge of a coffee pot and sends it crashing to the floor in an explosion of glass and brown liquid, but he sticks the landing. He puts himself between Sloan and Rafferty. His chest is heaving. His hands are shaking. He's holding a dirty dish rag in one fist like it's a weapon, a sword, a shield, something more than what it is. Let her go. His voice cracks on the second word. He's terrified. Every nerve in his body is screaming at him to run, to hide, to be invisible again. But his feet are planted on the checkered floor, and he's not moving. He's not moving because something deeper than fear, something that lives in the marrow of who he is, won't let him stand behind a counter while a girl is taken. Rafferty stares at him. For a long moment, the diner is completely silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain hammering on the roof. Then Rafferty laughs. It's a cold, dry sound like stones scraping together. Look at this. The busboy wants to play hero. He releases Sloan's wrist and turns his full attention to Caleb, his dead eyes measuring the boy the way a wolf measures prey. Go pour some coffee, kid. This is grown-up business. Let her go, Caleb says again, louder this time, steadier. I'm calling the police, Earl shouts from the corner. His hands shaking but his phone out, jabbing at the screen with arthritic fingers. That's the trigger. Rafferty moves fast, faster than Caleb expected. He pulls a collapsible baton from inside his jacket and flicks it open with a sharp metallic snap. The sound alone is enough to make Caleb's blood go cold, a mechanical click that promises pain the way a cocking hammer promises death. But Rafferty doesn't go for the old man. He swings at Caleb. The baton catches Caleb on the forearm with a crack that echoes through the diner. Pain explodes up his arm, white hot and searing like someone pressed a branding iron against his bone. He gasps, staggering back, but he doesn't go down. Adrenaline raw and animal surges through him like electricity. He shoves Rafferty backward with both hands harder than he knew he could push. Rafferty stumbles, genuinely surprised by the force. "Get him!" he snaps at his men. "Run!" Caleb yells at Sloan. "Go out the back!" Sloan scrambles out of the booth, grabbing the duffel bag. But the wiry man is blocking the hallway, and one of the heavy-set thugs is lunging toward her from the side. Caleb throws himself at the closest man, the one going for Sloan. They crash into a table, sending salt shakers, napkin holders, bottles of ketchup and mustard flying. Glass shatters. Condiments spray across the floor. Caleb fights with everything he has, wild and desperate throwing punches that have no technique but plenty of fury. He catches the man square on the jaw with a right hook that surprises them both. The thug stumbles, momentarily stunned. But there are four of them, and they're hired professionals. Sloan doesn't run. She could have. The hallway is momentarily clear while the wiry man rushes to help his friends with Caleb. She could sprint out the back door into the rain and the dark and disappear. She spent 3 weeks running. She's good at it, but she watches Caleb, this skinny kid she's known for 15 minutes, fighting three men twice his size because he couldn't stand by while someone was taken. He's getting beaten badly. A fist catches him in the ribs. A knee drives into his thigh. He keeps swinging, keeps fighting, but he's losing ground fast. Sloan makes a decision. She grabs the nearest heavy object she can find, a full glass bottle of ketchup, the old-fashioned kind, thick and heavy. She grips it by the neck, swings it with both hands, and brings it crashing down on the back of the nearest thug's skull. The bottle doesn't break like in the movies. It connects with a dull, wet thud that vibrates up her arms. The man crumples, instantly hitting the floor like a sack of wet cement. But the distraction costs Caleb his focus. He turns toward the sound for a fraction of a second. That's when Rafferty comes from behind. He's put the baton away. In his hand now is a knife. A 6-inch switchblade with a matte black handle, the blade catching the harsh fluorescent light. Sloan sees it first. "No!" she screams. Caleb turns. Too late and not enough. The blade punches into his side just below the ribs on the left. It goes in deep. Sloan hears the sound, a wet, intimate sound that she'll hear in her nightmares for years to come. The sound of steel entering flesh, of something being broken that can never be fully repaired. Caleb gasps. The air leaves his lungs all at once, like someone ripped the plug out of a balloon. He looks down at the knife in Rafferty's hand, still buried in his side, and his expression isn't pain. It's surprise. Pure, uncomprehending surprise, as if his body hasn't yet informed his brain what happened. Rafferty pulls the blade free. The blood comes immediately. Dark, fast, terrifyingly warm. It soaks through Caleb's flannel shirt and spills over his hand as he clutches his side. He falls to his knees, then to his back. The diner floor is cold against his skin, a mosaic of shattered glass, spilled ketchup, and his own blood spreading in a slow, dark pool. Rafferty kicks him once in the chest with cold efficiency. Caleb's head cracks against the tile. "Stupid kid," Rafferty spits. Sirens, The wiry man hisses, eyes darting to the window. Cops, we gotta go. Leave her, Rafferty decides, looking at the boy bleeding on the floor. Too much heat now. He points at Sloan with the bloody knife. This isn't over. Tell your daddy we're coming for the bay, and for the rest. They bolt, all four of them, one half dragging the man Sloan hit with the bottle, sprinting through the front door, and piling into a black Chevy Tahoe that peels out of the parking lot just as the first red and blue lights appear through the rain. Then they're gone. And the silence that follows is worse than the violence, because silence is where the consequences live. Sloan is on her knees beside Caleb before the echo of the Tahoe's tires has faded. The floor is a war zone, glass ketchup, mustard, and blood. So much blood. It's spreading faster than she thought possible, pooling around his body, soaking into the knees of her jeans warm against her skin. Caleb's face is gray. His eyes are open but unfocused, staring at the flickering fluorescent light above him. His breathing is shallow, rapid, each breath a thin whistle that sounds wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. Sloan doesn't panic. She's grown up in clubhouses where men came in bleeding from bar fights and worse. She's watched her father's medic stitch wounds on kitchen tables while the television played in the background. She knows the basics. She rips off her leather jacket, balls it up, and presses it against the wound in Caleb's side with both hands, leaning her full weight into it. "Stay with me," she says. Her voice is calm, forceful, the voice of a girl who has decided that this boy is not going to die on her watch. "Stay with me, Caleb. Look at me. Don't close your eyes." Caleb blinks. His gaze drifts to her face. He coughs, and blood flecks his lips, pink and frothy. That's bad. Sloan knows it's bad. It means the blade went deep enough to reach the lung or close to it. "You're okay," Caleb whispers. His voice is barely there, a dry rasp like dead leaves on concrete. "They didn't take you." "No," Sloan says. Tears are burning her eyes, but she doesn't let them fall. "Not yet." "No, they didn't. Because of you. You held the line." Caleb tries to smile. It's lopsided and pale, and it breaks something inside Sloan that she didn't know could break. "Good," he breathes. "That's good." Then his eyes roll back and his body goes slack beneath her hands. Earl is beside her, his gnarled hands pressing a stack of diner napkins against the wound alongside hers. His face is white, but his hands are steady, the hands of a man who carried mail bags through blizzards for 40 years and knows how to keep going when the world is coming apart. "Ambulances is coming, girl. 3 minutes. He's strong. He'll make it." Sloan doesn't take her hands off the wound. She doesn't look up from Caleb's face. She keeps pressure. She keeps talking. She tells him to hold on. She tells him the ambulance is close. She tells him she's not going to let him go. She means it more than she's ever meant anything in her 16 years on this earth. 3 minutes feels like 3 hours. The ambulance arrives with the police. Paramedics rush in, take over, cutaway. Caleb's shirt start IV lines. They work fast, their voices clipped and urgent. They load Caleb onto a stretcher and into the back of the ambulance with a speed that tells Sloan everything she needs to know about how bad it is. When people move that fast, it means there's no time to waste. Sloan stands in the middle of the ruined diner covered in blood. Caleb's blood. Her leather jacket is soaked dark. Her hands are red up to the wrists. She's shaking not from cold, but from the delayed shock of adrenaline finally releasing its grip. A deputy tries to talk to her. She can't hear him. The sirens are still screaming in her ears. She follows the ambulance to the hospital. She walks because her car has a flat tire and nobody thought to offer her a ride. She walks 2 miles in the rain carrying the black duffel bag over her shoulder, her boots splashing through puddles that reflect the red and blue lights of patrol cars racing past her toward the diner. She doesn't feel the rain. She doesn't feel the cold. She feels only one thing, a burning crystalline resolve that settles into her bones like molten iron cooling into steel. This is her fault. All of it. A boy she'd known for 15 minutes is on an operating table because she walked into his diner carrying a problem she had no right to bring to his door. She can't undo that. She can't take back the knife, but she can make sure it means something. She can make sure the people who did this answer for it. And she can make sure Caleb Morrison doesn't die in the dark without someone fighting for him the way he fought for her. The Ashwood County Medical Center is a small building, 2 stories red brick, with a parking lot that holds maybe 40 cars. It's not equipped for what just came through its doors. The emergency room has 2 bays. The surgical suite is designed for appendectomies, not knife wounds that shred livers and puncture diaphragms. Dr. Marcus Ashford, the lead trauma surgeon, a lean man with silver hair and steady hands, arrives 9 minutes after Caleb, still pulling on his scrubs. The team works frantically. The knife has lacerated Caleb's liver, nicked his diaphragm, and ruptured his spleen. He's losing blood faster than they can replace it. Sloan sits in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzz above her, casting everything in flat, sterile white. She's still wearing Caleb's blood. A nurse offers her a change of clothes. She refuses. She doesn't deserve clean clothes. Not while he's in there fighting. At 3 in the morning, Dr. Ashford emerges from surgery looking like a man who's been in a prize fight and only barely won. His scrubs are sweat-soaked. His eyes are bloodshot. "The boy made it through surgery," Ashford says, and Sloan's entire body sags with a relief so physical it's almost violent. But it was close. The blade lacerated his liver and nicked his diaphragm. We had to remove his spleen. He's lost a massive amount of blood. He's in a medically induced coma. "What are his chances?" Sloan asks. 40%, Ashford says. "If he doesn't develop an infection and if his vitals stabilize over the next 48 hours, he has a fighting chance. But I won't lie to you, it's going to be close." 40%, less than coin flip. Sloan feels the number land in her chest like a stone thrown into still water, ripples of dread spreading outward. Diane Morrison arrives at 3:15. She's a small woman, thin with tired eyes and hands red and rough from years of hard work. She comes in a coat thrown over her nightgown, her hair unbrushed, her face a mask of terror. When she sees Sloan, she freezes. "Are you hurt?" Diane asks, because that's the kind of woman she is. Even in the worst moment of her life, her first instinct is to care for someone else. "No, ma'am," Sloan says. "This isn't my blood, it's Caleb's. He saved my life tonight." Diane's face crumbles. She collapses into a chair, pulling a rosary from her coat pocket. The beads click softly between her fingers, a tiny rhythmic sound that fills the silent waiting room like a heartbeat. Sloan sits down across from her. She can't leave. She has to explain. But how do you explain to a terrified mother that help is coming, that the medical bills will be covered, that an army of bikers is about to descend on her town because her son was brave enough to stand up? You don't explain. Not yet. You just sit with her. You hold the silence. You share the weight. They sit together through the darkest hours of the morning, 2 strangers bound together by a boy's courage and a pool of blood on a diner floor. Diane prays. Sloan watches the clock. The minutes crawl like wounded animals. And then Sloan makes the call that changes everything. She has a cheap prepaid phone she bought in Spokane. She's never used it. She kept it for one purpose, a phone number she memorized, and swore she'd never dial unless the world was ending. The world is ending. She walks to the corner of the waiting room. She dials. It rings twice. Yeah, a deep voice, no hello, no greeting, just a single syllable that sounds like gravel rolling in a cement mixer. Sloan closes her eyes. She hasn't heard that voice in 3 weeks. It sounds like home. It sounds like safety. And it sounds like everything she's been running from. Daddy, she whispers. The silence on the other end is instant and absolute. It's the silence of a man whose entire body has gone rigid, whose heart has stopped between beats. Sloan Blackwood, where are you? Are you hurt? No, I'm okay. But Daddy, they found me. Rafferty and his crew, the ones who work for Graves, they tracked me down. I'm on my way, Magnus Blackwood says. The words come fast, automatic, with the force of a freight train. Wait, Sloan says. And here it is. The moment that separates Sloan from every other club daughter, every other runaway, every other girl who called her father for help. She doesn't just call for rescue. She sets the terms. Daddy, listen to me. A boy saved me tonight. He works at a diner. He's 17 years old. He stepped between me and Rafferty and took a knife for me. He's in surgery right now, and they're telling me he might not make it. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who you are. He just saw a girl in trouble and stood up. He bled for me, Daddy. When Magnus speaks again, his voice is different. The sharpness is still there, but beneath it is something raw, something ancient. The voice of a man who understands sacrifice the way a priest understands prayer. What's his name? Caleb Morrison. Is he still breathing? Barely. You tell the doctors to do everything. You tell them money is no object. You tell them Magnus Blackwood is paying every bill. And then she draws the line in the sand. You come for him, not for me, Sloan says. You come because a boy is dying for doing the right thing. And you come within the law. No rivers, no ditches, no disappearances. You come right or you don't come at all. The pause is long. She can hear him breathing. She can hear faintly the sound of boots on concrete. He's already moving. You don't give me orders, Sloan. I'm not giving you an order. I'm asking you to be the man I used to believe you were. Another pause. Longer. We're coming, Magnus says, all of us. The line goes dead. Sloan lowers the phone. Her hand is shaking. She looks across the room at Detective Cole Harper, a tired-looking man with thinning hair and nicotine stains on his index finger, who arrived to take her statement and is watching her with a mixture of suspicion and unease. Who was that? Harper asks. My father. Is he coming to pick you up? Sloan looks out the window at the dark, empty parking lot. The rain hasn't stopped. It streams down the glass in silver rivulets, distorting the glow of the streetlights. He's coming, Sloan says quietly, but he's not coming alone. It starts around 5:30 in the morning. The first hint of gray light touches the eastern sky just enough to separate the mountains from the clouds. Deputy Kyle Harris is parked on Route 89, drowsy, half asleep in his cruiser, the radar gun in his lap. He's not watching for speeders at this hour. He's watching for nothing because nothing ever happens in Ashwood at 5:30 in the morning. He feels it before he hears it. A tremor, subtle at first like a heavy truck on a nearby road. The coffee in his cup holder ripples. The rear-view mirror vibrates, then comes the sound. It starts low, a drone like a swarm of hornets far away. But it grows. It deepens. It turns into a roar that isn't a roar but a thunder, a rolling, continuous thunder that shakes the windows of his cruiser and rattles the fillings in his teeth. V-twin engines, the distinctive syncopated heartbeat of American iron. Not one, not 10, hundreds. Harris looks in his side mirror. His jaw drops. Cresting the hill 2 miles back, a wall of headlights appears. They stretch across both lanes of the highway, three abreast, running lights blazing like the eyes of an advancing army. The lead bike is a massive custom Harley Road King, blacked out with ape hanger handlebars, and a rider who looks less like a man and more like a monument carved from granite and leather. Harris fumbles for his radio. Dispatch, this is Harris on Route 89. We have a situation. Multiple motorcycles inbound. I'm estimating, Jesus, I don't know, 100 more. Say again, Harris, motorcycles, a lot of them, headed into town. By the time the sun fully breaks over the ridge, the roar has consumed Ashwood. Citizens waking for work peer through their curtains and see something out of a fever dream. A river of black leather and polished chrome rolling down Main Street, shaking the autumn leaves from the trees, rattling the windows of the hardware store, drowning out the church bells that ring at 6 every morning. They turn onto Elm Street toward the hospital. Sloan hears them before she sees them. She's standing at the window of the waiting room. Diane is asleep in the chair behind her, finally claimed by exhaustion. The first light of dawn is coloring the sky in shades of ash and steel. Then the glass begins to vibrate. The sound rises from the earth like something alive, a rumble that grows into a growl, that grows into a roar that shakes the pictures on the walls. Sloan presses her hand against the window. She feels the vibration through her palm, through her bones. They come around the corner in a wave. Row after row of motorcycles, headlights, blazing chrome gleaming in the early light. They fill the parking lot. They spill onto the street. They line the sidewalks. 200 machines, 200 men, arranged in perfect rows like soldiers on a parade ground. At the front, the massive Road King kills its engine. The silence that follows is deafening. 200 engines cut out in a wave one after another, the silence spreading through the formation like a held breath. Magnus Ironjaw Blackwood dismounts. He's 6'4" with a beard like steel wool and arms thick as oak branches covered in ink that tell stories of roads and brotherhood and a life lived outside the lines. He takes off his helmet and hangs it on the handlebar. He walks straight toward the sliding glass doors. Behind him, 200 men dismount and stand in rank, silent arms crossed waiting. Inside the waiting room, Sloan watches her father push through the doors. He fills the room with his presence the way a thunderstorm fills a valley. Nurses freeze. An orderly drops a clipboard. Even the hum of the fluorescent light seems to quiet. His eyes find Sloan. "Daddy," she says. She doesn't run to him. She stands her ground because that's what she promised herself she'd do. She won't collapse into his arms like a little girl. Not now. Not after everything she's done to prove she's more than that. But Magnus crosses the room in 3 strides and wraps her in his arms anyway. For one moment, the mask slips. He's not a club president. He's not Ironjaw. He's a father who hasn't slept in 3 weeks, who's torn the West Coast apart looking for his daughter, who drove through the night, fueled by nothing but terror and love. He holds her so tight she can't breathe. She lets him, just for a moment. Then she pulls back. I'm okay, she says, looking up at him with those fierce storm cloud eyes. But he's not. Room 304. His name is Caleb Morrison. 40% chance. His mother's right there. Magnus releases Sloan. He turns. His eyes find Diane Morrison, who's been jolted awake by the noise, and is now standing trembling, backed against the wall, clutching her rosary, as if it's the only thing between her and the end of the world. Magnus walks over to her. The leather of his cut creaks with every step. His boots are heavy on the linoleum. He's a terrifying figure, a mountain of muscle and ink and scars. And Diane is shaking so hard the rosary beads are clicking. He stops in front of her. He slowly removes his sunglasses. His eyes are red-rimmed from the wind and the worry and the long night ride, but they're kind, unexpectedly, unmistakably kind. He goes down on one knee. The president of the Iron Saints kneels on the scuffed linoleum floor of a county hospital in front of a cleaning lady in a nightgown. "Ma'am," Magnus says, his voice a low rumble but gentle reverent. "My name is Magnus Blackwood. Your son saved my little girl's life last night." Diane stares at him. She can't speak. Her lips move, but no sound comes out. "There's no debt I can pay that equals what he did," Magnus continues. "But I promise you this, your boy is under my protection now. He's under the protection of the Iron Saints. The men who did this to him, we're going to find them." He stands and the temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. "And God help them," Magnus says, "because the police won't be able to." Sloan watches from across the room. She watches her father kneel before a stranger, and she sees something she hasn't seen in years. She sees the man she used to believe in, the man who built his kingdom, not on fear, but on a code. Loyalty earned, debts paid, the weak protected by the strong. She set the terms, he's met them, so far. But the sun is barely up, and the hardest part is still coming. By noon, the town holds its breath and waits. The Iron Saints have settled over Ashwood like an occupying army, quiet and disciplined, but unmistakably present. The bikers rotate shifts. Some sleep in the waiting room stretched across plastic chairs. Others patrol the hallways in pairs. The nurses and staff adapt with the resigned practicality of people who have no choice. The bikers are polite. They say please and thank you. They hold doors open. They keep their voices down near patient rooms. It's by all accounts the most courteous occupation in history. Magnus hasn't moved from the ICU waiting area. Dr. Ashford delivers the morning update. Caleb made it through the night. Vitals stabilizing. Critical 48 hours ahead. Magnus demands whatever resources the boy needs. He orders Boone, his sergeant-at-arms, a wiry man with a shaved head and a scar from his left ear to his chin, to set up a fund for the Morrison family. Mortgage, utilities, food, everything. Diane Morrison will not worry about a single bill. Then Sheriff Dale Guthrie arrives with his deputies and Detective Harper, and the confrontation that follows is as inevitable as it is one-sided. Guthrie demands the bikers leave. Magnus points out they're parked legally. And then Boone announces they found the abandoned getaway vehicle before the police did. A black Chevy Tahoe, stolen plates, out of Salem, ditched on a logging road off Route 4. Sloan watches the exchange from down the hallway. She watches Detective Harper. And she notices something nobody else seems to see. When Boone announces they found the Tahoe, Harper doesn't react with surprise. He reacts with calculation. The micro-expression of a man who already knew where the vehicle was, but chose not to find it. She files that away. She doesn't yet know what it means, but she will. After the police retreat, Sloan waits until her father is occupied with his war council and Diane has fallen asleep again. Then she takes the duffel bag to a small administrative office on the first floor, borrows a laptop from a kind nurse named Ruth, and plugs in the USB drive. The drive contains 3 files, a spreadsheet, a PDF, a video. She opens the spreadsheet first. It takes her less than 30 seconds to understand what she's looking at. And when she does, the blood drains from her face. It's a ledger, dates, names, amounts, payments made by Edmund Graves to law enforcement officers, city officials, judges, and federal agents across 3 states, Montana, Washington, Idaho. The amounts range from $5,000 to $200,000. The dates go back 4 years, dozens of names. Some she recognizes from news reports: a state senator, a Port Authority director, a DEA supervisor. Then a name jumps off the screen and hits her like a fist. Detective Cole Harper, Ashwood County Sheriff's Department. Monthly payments of $3,000, 4 years running. Last payment dated 6 days ago. The room tilts. The detective investigating Kaleba's stabbings, a man who tried to take her statement. The man who's right now processing the Tahoe is on Edmund Graves' payroll. Everything Harper learns goes straight back to Graves. The investigation is compromised from the inside. She keeps scrolling. The second name is worse. Darren Porter, Prospector Honor Saints, MC, Northern Montana chapter. Payments of $10,000 quarterly, 18 months. Sloan stares at the screen until the letters blur. Porter, she knows him. 22 years old, eager. One of the new prospects her fathers had been grooming for full membership. He was at the clubhouse in Reno the night she left. He was one of the men assigned to watch over her. He knew her habits, her favorite bus routes, the Greyhound stations she'd mentioned wanting to visit. He fed her location to Graves' people. He's the reason Rafferty found her in a diner in a town nobody's ever heard of. She opens the PDF. Financial routing numbers, shell companies, wire transfers totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. This is the entire digital skeleton of Edmund Graves' money laundering operation. She closes the laptop. She doesn't open the video file yet, but she knows what it must contain. She's seen enough. Sloan sits in the quiet office and thinks. Her first instinct is to go to Magnus, but she knows her father. If she tells him that Porter betrayed the club, sold out, his daughter Porter will disappear. A logging road, a shallow grave, and if that happens, the evidence is tainted. Lawyers will argue fabrication. Graves walks free. The evidence needs to be exposed cleanly, legally, through a process that will hold up in a courtroom. She slips the USB drive into her jeans pocket and goes to find Porter. He's in the hospital cafeteria, sitting alone picking at a sandwich. His prospect cut looks like it doesn't fit him properly. His eyes are nervous. When Sloan sits down across from him, something flickers across his face. Guilt. She confronts him directly. She lays out the facts. She watches his composure shatter. He confesses. They said nobody would get hurt, he whispers through his fingers. They said they'd grab the bag and let you go. I didn't know about the knife. I swear to God, Sloan, I didn't know. Why, she asks. Porter looks up. His eyes are wet. My uncle, Judge Thomas Warren. Graves had him killed 2 years ago. Made it look like a heart attack. But I knew, and nobody would listen. So when Graves people approached me, said they'd help me get revenge on the club for not protecting my family, I believed them. I thought I was doing the right thing. You weren't working for revenge, Sloan says quietly. You were working for the man who killed your uncle. Porter's face crumples. I know. I know that now. Jesus Christ, what have I done? She records every word on her prepaid phone. 27 minutes of confession. Then she takes the recording to Boone and explains why Magnus can't know yet. If Dad finds out Porter's dead, and if Porter's dead, the confession is worthless. We need him alive. We need him to testify. Boone handles it. Porter loses his cut. He's put on a bus with a one-way ticket to Seattle and instructions to stay in a specific motel until the FBI calls. He doesn't come back. After Boone disappears down the stairwell, Sloan walks to the restroom at the end of the hallway. She locks the door. She stands at the sink and looks at the stranger in the mirror. Short hair, dark circles, a smear of dried blood on her neck, and then it hits her. All of it. The knife going into Caleb's side, the sound, the blood on her hands, the walk in the rain, Diane's face, Porter's confession, the weight of the USB drive in her pocket. She grips the edge of the sink. Her knuckles go white. The sob comes from somewhere deep, somewhere she sealed shut 3 weeks ago. It tears through her chest like a fist. She presses her hand over her mouth, muffling the sound. Because even now, even alone, she can't bring herself to let the world hear her break. She cries for 2 minutes. Exactly 2 minutes. She times it the way you time a wound that needs to drain before you stitch it shut. She lets the pain come, lets it wash through her, lets it shake her body and blur her vision. Then she turns on the faucet, splashes cold water on her face, wipes her eyes, breathes. Enough, she says to her reflection. Not harsh, not cold. Just the quiet, resolute command of a girl who's given herself permission to be human for 120 seconds and is now choosing to be a fortress again. She unlocks the door and walks back into the hallway. Sloan sits with Caleb in the ICU that afternoon. He looks impossibly young against the white sheets, the tubes, the ivy lines, the monitors, a landscape of fragility. But his chest rises and falls with a rhythm that's steady. Steady as alive. She holds his hand. His fingers are cold but warming. I don't know if you can hear me, she says quietly, but what you did matters. It wasn't wasted. You stood up for a stranger, and that stranger is going to make it count. I promise. She squeezes his hand and thinks she feels the faintest pressure in return. She chooses to believe it's real. Then she hears the footsteps in the hallway and something prickles at the base of her skull. 2 people walking. Their footsteps are sharp, crisp, the click of hard-soled dress shoes on linoleum. Hospital staff wear soft-soled shoes, sneakers, clogs. These shoes are Italian leather, polished, expensive, and beneath the loose scrub pants of the man on the right, a bulge at the ankle, a holster, cleaners. Graves has sent cleaners to finish what Rafferty started. Sloan acts fast. She texts Boone a single word now. She moves Diane to a locked restroom down the hall. Then she steps into the doorway of room 304 with her phone recording and confronts the 2 men. Can I help you? She asks, her voice loud, clear, carrying down the hallway. The 2 men stop. One is tall, with the build of a linebacker and dark skin. The other is white, shorter, wiry, with dead professional eyes that belong in a war zone. Just here to check vitals, the tall one says. His voice is flat, rehearsed. Funny, Sloan says, because I've been here all day and I've never seen either of you before. And your scrubs still have the package creases in them. And that's a Glock 19 on your ankle. The wiry one's hand moves toward his waistband. 8 seconds. That's how long it takes for Hendricks and Briggs, two Iron Saints nomads who've been shadowing Sloan all morning, to come through the stairwell door like an avalanche. Hendricks, 6'6" former Army Ranger, hits the tall man with a tackle that sends them both crashing into the wall. The man's head bounces off the drywall with a sound like a hammer hitting a watermelon. Briggs, the Marine Corps sniper, moves with surgical precision. He's on the wiry man in 2 steps, one hand twisting the gun away, the other driving a knee into the solar plexus. The man drops gasping. No shots fired. 2 men on the floor zip-tied a suppressed pistol skittering across the linoleum. Sloan stops recording. She has evidence. Clear video. Faces visible. Weapon in frame. Timestamp in the corner. She tells Boone to hold them for the FBI, not the local police, not Harper. Detective Harper is compromised. She says, tapping her pocket where the USB drive sits. He's on Graves' payroll. Everything goes federal or everything falls apart. Then she goes to Magnus and tells him all of it. The USB drive, the ledger, Harper, Porter's betrayal, the cleaners. She tells him like a field commander delivering a briefing, facts, clear, unadorned. Magnus listens. The fury builds behind his eyes like pressure behind a dam. When she mentions Porter, a vein in his temple pulses. When she mentions the cleaners, his fists clench. He should be in the ground, Magnus says about Porter. And if he were open, Sloan replies, the USB drive evidence would be compromised. Every lawyer Graves hires would argue the data was fabricated. Porter walking away clean keeps the evidence clean. Magnus stares at his daughter. He's seeing her for the first time, not as his little girl, not as the princess of the Iron Saints. As a strategist, as a leader. She tells him the plan. Use Rafferty to lure Graves to the abandoned sawmill off Route 4. Floodlights, not guns. Beanbag rounds, not bullets. Restrain them, then call the FBI. Caleb didn't stab anyone, Sloan says, and her voice cracks. He didn't pull a gun. He just stood up. He stood up, Daddy. And if you go out there and beat Rafferty to death or throw Graves in a river, you're betraying everything that boy represents. Magnus' eyes are wet. He'll deny it later. Beanbag rounds, Sloan says. Non-lethal. Everyone goes home breathing. Everyone goes to prison, not to the morgue. Magnus exhales through his nose. The sound of a bull being told to stand down. Non-lethal, he says. Fine, but if they shoot first, we finish it. Fair, Sloan says. At 6:45 that evening, Boone and 4 nomads bring Rafferty to the hospital basement. The motel room breach took 15 seconds. Rafferty sits in a folding chair, his scorpion tattoo distorted by bruises, his dead eyes alive for the first time with something that looks like fear. Sloan sits across from him and lays out his options. Call Graves and lure him to the sawmill, or face 25 to life as a co-conspirator with no one to cut a deal with. Rafferty calculates. Gears turn. Exits close. He makes the call. Midnight, he says into the phone. The old Clearwater Mill. Bring the payment. I've got the girl and the drive. Graves agrees. Before she leaves the hospital, Sloan stops at room 304 one last time. She stands over Caleb's bed and memorizes his face. the shaggy hair pushed back by a nurse, the bandages white against white. I'm going to do something tonight that scares me more than anything I've ever done, she says. But I keep thinking about you, about the way you jumped over that counter with nothing but a dish rag. You didn't have a plan. You didn't have backup. You just moved because it was right. So I'm going to move too. And when you wake up, this is going to be over. All of it. I promise. She touches his hand. His skin is warm, warmer than it had been that afternoon. She walks out without looking back. The old Clearwater sawmill sits on a high bluff overlooking the Yellowstone River fork, a skeletal ruin of rusted corrugated metal and rotting timber that's been surrendering to the Montana elements for decades. The main warehouse is a vast cathedral-like space, 2 stories of open floor beneath a lattice of still catwalks and overhead beams. The roof is half gone, stripped by winter storms, letting in the sky in the rain. Sloan arrives at 9:30, 3 hours early. She's drawn the layout on a napkin. She's identified catwalks, machinery positions, blind spots, choke points. She's calculated sight lines and positioned 6 high-intensity construction lamps, each capable of throwing 14,000 lumens. She's made Boone repeat the plan twice and corrected him when he got a detail wrong. She's 16 years old and she's commanding a military operation. The nomads move through the sawmill like ghosts. Several are former military. 2 did tours in Afghanistan. Briggs, the Marine Corps sniper, knows how to set an ambush the way a surgeon knows how to hold a scalpel. They rig the floodlights in the rafters, wired to a single switch that Sloan will hold from the catwalk 30 feet above the floor. Each man carries a shotgun loaded with beanbag rounds. Each man also carries a sidearm with hollow points in case the world stops listening to good intentions. Magnus takes his position at midnight. He stands alone in the center of the warehouse, a solitary figure in the vast dark space lit by a single work lamp that casts his shadow across the debris like a sundial marking the final hours. Rafferty sits tied to a chair behind him, gagged and bruised a prop in the final act. Sloan climbs to the catwalk at 11:45. The metal rungs are slick with rain and rust. She crouches behind the railing, the floodlight switch in her left hand, her phone in her right. She looks down at her father standing alone in the dark and feels a terror so profound it nearly buckles her knees. If this goes wrong, he'll be first in the crossfire. She pushes the fear down, locks it away. There will be time for fear later. Right now, there's only the plan. At 12:07, Boone's voice crackles in her earpiece. 2 SUVs, black Cadillac Escalades, armored. Military grade. Sloane's stomach drops. She'd planned for 4, maybe 5 men, not armored vehicles and professional soldiers. Hold positions, she says. Nobody moves until I say. The Escalades roll through the loading bay door like hearses. Dark, deliberate. They stop 20 yards from Magnus. 6 men step out. Not street criminals, private military contractors. They move with fluid, lethal economy, checking corners, scanning darkness, suppressed carbines at low-ready night vision goggles atop their heads. Then Edmund Graves steps out. He's a disappointing figure. Small, slight, wearing a charcoal wool overcoat that probably cost more than Diane Morrison makes in 6 months. Thin hands, wire-rimmed glasses, the officious manner of a man who views the world as a series of transactions. He holds a black umbrella over his head, fussy and precise, even in a ruin. But there's something else. A fourth figure emerges from the second escalade, stumbling hands bound a black hood over his head. One of the contractors rips off the hood. Judge Thomas Warren, 68 years old, thin, pale, bruised, very much alive. Sloan's breath catches. The Judge Graves supposedly had killed 2 years ago. The reason Porter joined Graves. The lie that started everything. Graves kept him alive, tortured him, used him, and now he's using him as a human shield. "You're not Rafferty," Graves says, his voice bored. He checks his cuticles. "Rafferty's indisposed," Magnus says. "I'm the father." Graves sighs. "The biker. I was hoping to abide this. It's all so theatrical." He gestures to his men with a lazy wave, the way someone might gesture to a waiter. "Kill him, find the girl, find the drive, burn the building. I have a flight to catch." 6 rifles rise. 6 red laser sights converge on Magnus' chest. But one of the contractors shoves Judge Warren forward, holding him as a shield between Magnus and the shooters. "Can't shoot through a federal judge," the contractor says with a cold smile. Sloan's hand tightens on the switch. The plan is falling apart. They can't shoot without hitting Warren. "Now," she says into her mic. She throws the switch. The warehouse explodes with light. 84,000 lumens, all directed downward, turning the darkness into a blinding white inferno. The mercenaries' eyes, adjusted to near total darkness, are hit with the wall of light that's physically painful. 2 stumble backward. 1 drops to a knee. The night vision goggles catch the reflected glare and become instruments of torture. The nomads move fast and hard from behind the machinery, from the shadows, from positions the mercenaries hadn't been able to check, because Sloan had placed the lights to create specific blind spots. 2 beanbag rounds drop the first mercenary. A second goes down the same way, but the remaining 4 adapt in seconds. Combat veteran training kicks in through the shock. 2 drop behind the armored escalades and begin returning fire. Controlled, aimed, bursts. The suppressed carbines make a sound like angry whispers. Rounds spark off machinery, shatter a floodlight, send debris flying. Then the sound Sloan's been dreading. A cry of pain from the shadows. Briggs. A round caught him in the thigh as he advanced along the east wall. He goes down, dragging himself behind a steel column, blood soaking through his jeans. His jaw is clenched, his hands pressing against the wound. Below her, Magnus charges a mercenary who's come around the escalade. 240 pounds, propelled by fury. He lowers his shoulder and hits the man like a freight train, slamming him into the vehicle hard enough to dent the armored panel. But the mercenary fires as he's being hit. A round tears through Magnus's leather cut and carves a furrow across his left shoulder. Magnus roars, not in pain, in anger. He grabs the stunned mercenary and hurls him into the concrete floor. More mercenaries go down, but the contractor holding Judge Warren is backing toward the loading bay, using the judge as a shield, laying down disciplined fire that pins 2 nomads behind a bandsaw housing. The situation is stuck. Briggs bleeding, Magnus bleeding. A stalemate in a fight that needs to end fast. But Sloan can see the contractor from the catwalk. She's directly above and behind his position. He doesn't know she's there. Then she hears an engine roar. A pickup truck, headlights blazing, crashes through the loading bay entrance. Darren Porter is behind the wheel. He's not supposed to be here. He's supposed to be in Seattle. But he's here, and he's driving straight at the Escalade holding Judge Warren. Porter, no, Sloan screams. But Porter's made his choice. The truck slams into the side of the Escalade at 40 miles per hour. The impact is apocalyptic. Metal screams. Glass explodes. The Escalade tips rolls onto its side. The contractor holding Warren is thrown clear, losing his grip. Judge Warren stumbles, free falling to the concrete, dazed but alive. And Porter's truck front end crushed radiator, steaming, sits in the wreckage. Porter kicks open the driver's door and falls out, clutching his chest. Blood spreads across his shirt. He was shot during the approach, hit by fire from one of the contractors as he accelerated toward the Escalade. "Get the judge," Sloan yells. Hendricks sprints forward, grabs Warren, drags him behind cover. The remaining mercenaries are disoriented, their formation broken. The nomads press the advantage. More beanbag rounds. More men on the ground. But Porter's on his knees in the open, exposed, bleeding. Magnus runs to him. "What the hell are you doing here?" Magnus roars, dragging Porter behind a concrete pillar. "Fixing it," Porter gasps, blood bubbles on his lips. "I had to fix it. Judge Warren, my uncle. I couldn't let him die because of me." Magnus presses his hand against Porter's chest wound. The blood wells between his fingers, warm and unstoppable. "Medic," Magnus shouts. But Porter grabs Magnus's vest, pulls him close. "Tell Sloan I'm sorry. Tell her I tried to be better." His eyes go unfocused. His hand goes slack. Darren Porter dies on the floor of the Clearwater Mill, 22 years old, a traitor who became a hero in the last 30 seconds of his life. Silence falls. The fight is over. 6 mercenaries zip-tied and unconscious. Judge Warren safe. Graves standing alone near his overturned Escalade umbrella, gone glasses, crooked coat spattered with rain and concrete dust. Magnus stands covered in Porter's blood and walks toward Graves. Graves tries to speak. "You can't. I have immunity. I have files. I know people." "Shut up," Magnus says, not loudly, just final. He grabs Graves by the collar and drags him through the loading bay out into the rain to the edge of the bluff overlooking the river. The water far below is swollen by days of rain, a churning roar. The drop is 80 feet. The current is fast, dark, merciless. Magnus pushes Graves to the edge. The smaller man stumbles, nearly going over. He catches himself and looks down at the black water. "Please," Graves says. The word comes out thin and high-stripped of every pretense. The naked sound of a man who's finally encountered something his money can't fix. "Please, I can pay you anything." "Name a price." Boone appears at Magnus' side. He looks at the river, then at Graves, then at Magnus. "River's deep," Boone says quietly. "Current's fast. Nobody would ever find him." Magnus stands at the edge of the bluff, rain streaming down his face, blood running down his arm. He looks at the man who sent killers after his daughter, the man who ordered a 16-year-old girl brought in or killed over a USB drive, the man whose greed put a knife in the side of a 17-year-old kid who was guilty of nothing except courage. He thinks about the river. He thinks about how easy it would be. One push, a short fall, the cold water and the current washing everything clean. The old Magnus would have done it. The man he'd been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, wouldn't have hesitated. Blood for blood. The books balance with the body. Then he hears the footsteps behind him. Light footsteps, quick and sure. Sloan appears at the edge of the loading bay. She soaked her short hair, plastered to her forehead, her face pale in the rain. She has a cut on her palm from the floodlight housing blood running between her fingers and mixing with the rainwater. She walks toward her father. She doesn't run. She doesn't shout. She walks with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who knows exactly what she's about to do and exactly why. She stops 3 feet from the edge. "Daddy," Sloan says. Magnus doesn't look at her. His jaw is locked, his muscles rigid. The rain runs into his eyes and down his beard. "Daddy, look at me." He turns his head just enough to see her. "The boy in that hospital," Sloan says, and her voice is steady despite everything. "He didn't kill anyone. He didn't break any bones. He didn't throw anyone off a cliff. He walked into a fight with armed men carrying nothing but a dish rag, and he won. Not because he was stronger, because he was better. He was better than them, and he was better than this." She gestures at the scene, the bluff, the river, the weeping man at the edge. "If you throw him off that cliff, you prove every person who ever called you a thug right. Every cop, every prosecutor, every reporter who said the Iron Saints are just criminals with motorcycles. And you prove Caleb wrong. You prove that standing up, doing the right thing, bleeding for a stranger, none of it matters, because in the end, the biggest fist wins." Magnus stares at her. His eyes are burning, not from the rain, from something deeper, something tearing through walls he'd built over decades. "He ordered them to kill you," Magnus says. His voice is raw, broken in places he didn't know could break. "He sat in his car and said the words, 'Kill her,' like you were nothing, like my baby girl was a line item on a ledger." "I know," Sloan says, "and that's why this has to go to court. That's why the world has to hear those words. Not in a river, not in the dark, in a courtroom, on the record, where it counts." She takes a step closer, close enough to touch him. "If you do this, I lose you, not because you'll go to prison, because I'll never be able to look at you the same way again. And I just got you back, Daddy. I just started seeing the man I used to believe in. Don't take that away from me." The silence between them is absolute. Even the rain seems to hold its breath. Magnus looks at his daughter. He looks at Graves. He looks at the river. He releases his grip. Graves collapses onto the wet ground, gasping, curling into himself like a child waking from a nightmare. His expensive coat ruined. His glasses gone, fallen into the mud. He weeps without sound, his body shaking. Magnus steps back from the edge. He turns away from the river and faces his daughter. The rain runs between them like a curtain. "Call the sheriff," Magnus says. His voice is quiet now, drained. The voice of a man who's just fought the hardest battle of his life and won by not throwing a single punch. "Tell him we have a present for the FBI." Sloan pulls out her phone and dials the Portland FBI field office's 24-hour tip line. She identifies herself. She describes the money laundering operation. She lists the contents of the USB drive. She gives the coordinates of the sawmill. She tells them to send a team quickly. She answers 3 questions and hangs up. Boone zip ties Graves' hands behind his back. The nomads load the unconscious mercenaries into the Escalades. The Iron Saints vanish into the night on silent engines. By the time Sheriff Guthrie and the state police arrive, followed 30 minutes later by 2 black SUVs from the FBI's Portland office, the warehouse is empty of bikers. All that remains are 6 zip-tied mercenaries on their knees, a battered Rafferty still tied to his chair, Judge Thomas Warren wrapped in a blanket and shaking, and Edmund Graves sitting in the mud with a USB drive taped to his forehead with duct tape. Sloan's idea. She thought it added a certain poetic symmetry. The drive back to the hospital is quiet. Sloan sits in the van, her head leaning against the cold metal wall, her eyes closed. The adrenaline is draining out of her body, leaving behind an exhaustion so complete it feels like her bones are dissolving. Magnus sits across from her, his shoulder field dressed, wrapped in gauze. It will need stitches, but he refused treatment until Sloan was safe. You were right, Magnus says into the darkness of the van. Sloan opens her eyes. About all of it. Porter, Harper, the plan, the river, about Caleb, about what he represents. He looks at his scarred knuckles, the tattoos covering his arms, the leather cut that's defined his identity for 3 decades. I've spent my whole life living by a code. Loyalty, strength, blood for blood. And I thought that was enough. I thought that was what made a man. But that kid in the hospital, he never lived by any code. He never swore any oath. He just saw someone in trouble and stood up. No backup, no army, no plan, just him and a dish rag and more guts than any man I've ever known. He looks at Sloan, his eyes are wet. You asked me to be the man you used to believe in. I don't know if I am that man, Sloan, but I'm going to try. Sloan reaches across the van and takes her father's hand. His fingers are rough, scarred, calloused from decades of gripping handlebars and making fists. She holds him gently. That's all I ever wanted, she says. They ride the rest of the way in silence. Father and daughter, the storm and the mountain, connected by something stronger than blood, stronger than code, connected by the choice to be better. Caleb Morrison opens his eyes on a Friday morning. The first thing he sees is the ceiling. White acoustic tiles, each one dotted with tiny holes lit by a fluorescent panel that casts a flat antiseptic glow. The second thing he notices is the beeping, a steady rhythmic pulse from somewhere to his left. The third thing is the pain, a deep, hot line of fire along his left side from his ribs to his hip, pulsing with every heartbeat. He tries to move. His body rebels instantly. Easy, a voice says, soft, urgent, familiar in a way he can't immediately place. Don't try to move. You've got about 40 stitches and a missing spleen. The doctor said you're supposed to lie still for at least another week. Caleb blinks. He turns his head slowly, carefully, and sees her. Sloan is sitting on the wide windowsill, one knee pulled to her chest. She looks different from the girl who walked into the diner 5 nights ago. The oversized leather jacket is draped over a chair, laundered but still carrying a faint shadow of rust brown that no amount of detergent can fully erase. She wears a gray hoodie instead, soft and worn. Her face is clean, her short hair pulled back, and her storm cloud blue eyes are fixed on him with an intensity that makes the room feel very small. You're okay, Caleb says. It's not a question. It's the first thing his brain produces. The thought that's been frozen in place since the moment the world went dark on the diner floor. Yes, Sloan says. She smiles, and it's the first genuine, unguarded smile she's allowed herself in weeks. I'm okay, because of you. Did I win, T? Caleb asks. His voice is a dry crackle, and it hurts to speak, but the corner of his mouth turns up. Sloan lets out a breath that's half laugh, half sob. You won. You held the line and the cavalry came. They're gone, Caleb. Rafferty Graves, all of them. The FBI has them. It's over. Good, Caleb whispers. His eyes drift shut for a moment, the morphine pulling at him. That's good. Another voice, warm, breaking with emotion. Caleb opens his eyes again. His mother is there. Diane stands beside the bed, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She hasn't slept in 5 days, has barely eaten, has worn a path in the linoleum between the waiting room and the ICU. But in this moment, with her son's eyes open and focused, she looks like a woman who's just witnessed a resurrection. "Hey, Mom," Caleb says. Diane collapses forward, wrapping her arms around him as gently as she can, pressing her face into his shoulder, her body shaking with sobs that she's held back through days of terror and prayer. "My boy," she whispers, "my brave, stupid, wonderful boy." Caleb winces at the pressure at his side but doesn't complain. He holds his mother with his free arm and lets her cry. After a while, the door opens. The air shifts the way it always does when Magnus Blackwood enters a space. Not because he's loud, because he's a force, and forces don't need to announce themselves. He's not wearing his cut today. Dark t-shirt that strains across his broad chest, heavy denim jeans, left arm in a sling, the shoulder wound bandaged beneath the fabric. But he can't hide what he is. He fills the doorway like a wall. His beard is the color of iron filings. His arms are mapped with ink that tell decades of stories. He carries a motorcycle helmet in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. Caleb's eyes widen. "You're him, the dad." "I am," Magnus says. His voice is quiet, almost reverent, as if he's entering a church. He walks to the bedside, his boots making barely a sound. He looks down at the bandages, the tubes, the fragility of a 17-year-old kid who worked at a diner and had never been in a fight before the one that nearly killed him. Magnus extends his hand. It's massive, engulfing Caleb's completely, but he doesn't squeeze. He holds the boy's hand with a gentleness that seems impossible for a man that size. "You saved my world, son," Magnus says. His voice is thick with an emotion he spent a lifetime suppressing. "There aren't words for that. There's not enough money in the world to pay for that. You gave me back my daughter." "I just couldn't let them take her," Caleb murmurs. "He had a knife. She was scared. It wasn't right." "No," Magnus agrees. "It wasn't right, and most men would have run. Most men would have hid. You stood up." He releases Caleb's hand and reaches into his pocket. He pulls out a set of car keys and places them on the bedside table. "My boys went by your house," Magnus says. "We saw the Mustang in the driveway. Transmission was shot. Head gasket was blown." Caleb winces. "Yeah, I was saving up." "It's fixed," Magnus says. "New transmission, new engine, new paint. We even fixed the AC. It runs better than the day it rolled off the lot." Caleb stares at him. The car. The car he's been trying to fix every Saturday for 8 years. The car his father left behind like a broken promise wrapped in rusted metal. Fixed, running, whole. Then Magnus reaches into his other pocket and pulls out a second set of keys. Heavier. The key fob bears the silver shield of Harley Davidson. "I figured a young man who stared down a knife deserves something with a little more soul," Magnus says. "Something that understands the win. There's a 2024 Iron 8 8.3 Sportster in your garage. Matte black. Custom exhaust. Paid in full. Insurance and registration handled." Caleb looks at the keys in his palm. His throat is tight. His eyes are burning. "I can't accept this," he whispers. "You're not accepting a gift, Caleb," Magnus says, his tone shifting from warm to solemn. "You're accepting a tribute." He looks at Diane, who's watching from the other side of the bed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We set up a trust in your name this morning," Magnus says. "Full ride, tuition, books, housing, engineering school, medical school, whatever you choose. The Iron Saints are picking up the tab. Diane covers her mouth. A sound escapes her that's somewhere between a gasp and a prayer. Mr. Blackwood, you don't have to. I do, Magnus says, cutting her off gently. He bled for my family, Mrs. Morrison. My family will sweat for his. That's the code. He turns back to Caleb. Your family now, kid. You understand. You have brothers in every state. You ever have trouble, you ever feel unsafe, you make one call and we answer. Caleb looks at his mother. She's radiant, her exhaustion and grief transformed into a pride so fierce it seems to fill the room with light. He looks at Sloan watching from the windowsill with a smile that reaches her eyes for the first time since they met. For the first time in his life, Caleb Morrison, the invisible boy from Ashwood, the background character in his own town, feels seen. He feels valued. He feels like he matters. Thank you, Caleb whispers. Magnus steps back. He gives the boy a sharp, respectful nod, the kind a commanding officer gives a soldier who's proved himself under fire. No, Magnus says, thank you. He walks toward the door. He pauses in the frame, looks back at Sloan, and something passes between them. A question asked and answered without words. Then he walks out, his boots heavy on the linoleum, leaving the door open behind him. Sloan sits with Caleb for a while after Magnus leaves. Diane has gone to call her sister to share the good news, to cry happy tears into a phone in the hallway. The room is quiet except for the beep of the monitor and the distant rumble of 200 engines beginning to stir in the parking lot below. They're leaving, Caleb asks, looking toward the window. Yeah, back to the road, back to their lives. And you? The question hangs in the air like a held note. Sloan looks out the window at the sea of chrome and leather assembling in formation below. She can see her father's Road King gleaming black in the autumn sun, waiting at the head of the column. She could go with them. She could ride home back to Reno, back to the clubhouse, back to the life she was born into. Her father would welcome her. The club would celebrate. She'd be the president's daughter again, shielded, protected, untouchable, or she could choose something else. I'm not going with them, Sloan says quietly. Caleb looks at her. I'm going to stay here for a while. Help your mom while you recover. Get my feet under me. I'm going to enroll in school, finish my diploma, apply to college. She pauses. Law, Sloan says, and the word feels right in her mouth, solid and true like a key turning in a lock. I spent my whole life watching people solve problems with fists and money and fear. I want to learn how to solve them with words, with evidence, with the law. She looks at him and there's something luminous in her expression, a clarity that comes not from desperation but from conviction. You changed something, Caleb. You didn't throw a punch. You didn't pull a weapon. You stood in front of a girl with a dish rag and said no, and that was enough. That was more powerful than 200 motorcycles. I want to spend the rest of my life being that kind of powerful. Caleb is quiet for a long moment. Then he smiles. A real smile wide enough to crease his pale cheeks and make the pain in his side feel very far away. Law school, he says, that's going to make your dad's head explode. Sloan laughs, a real laugh, sudden and bright and surprised. The laugh of a girl who'd forgotten she was capable of it. He'll survive. He's tough. A knock at the door, soft. Boone stands there holding a black leather vest. He hands it to Sloan without a word and walks away. She brings it back to the bed and holds it up so Caleb can see. It's not a full member's cut. It's high-quality leather, clean and new without the patches and rockers that mark a patch member. But on the left breast, a single patch is stitched in white thread against the black leather, protected by the iron saints. My dad left this for you, Sloan says. She drapes it over the back of the chair beside Caleb's bed. Wear that and nobody anywhere will ever touch you again. From the parking lot below, the sound begins to rise. It starts as a low rumble, like the first tremor of an earthquake vibrating through the walls and the floor and the glass. Then it grows building in layers, engine after engine, joining the chorus until the sound is a living, breathing force that shakes the pictures on the walls and makes the water in the pitcher on Caleb's bedside table tremble. 200 engines roar to life in unison. Sloan walks to the window and looks down. The formation is perfect. 3 abreast stretching back through the parking lot and onto the street. A river of black and chrome flowing toward the highway. At the head Magnus Road, King rumbles with deep, unmistakable authority. She places her hand against the glass. She can feel the vibration through her palm, through her bones. Magnus doesn't look up. He doesn't wave. He kicks his bike into gear, and the column moves. 200 machines rolling in perfect formation, their pipes singing a song that the town of Ashwood will talk about for generations. They rolled down Elm Street, past the hospital, past the diner that's still closed behind yellow police tape, past the hardware store, in the barber shop, in the church. They turn onto Route 89 and head for the highway, the sound of their engines fading slowly like thunder rolling away after a storm. Sloan watches until the last taillight disappears beyond the ridge. Then she turns back to the room. Caleb is watching her. His eyes are heavy with morphine, but they're warm. You really aren't going, he says. No, Sloan says. She sits back down on the windowsill and pulls her knee to her chest. I'm done running, Caleb. I'm done hiding. I'm done being someone else's story. She looks out the window at the empty road, at the quiet town settling back into its ordinary rhythm, at the pale October sun climbing above the ridge and spilling golden light across the valley. This is where I start my own, she says. The legend of Ashwood spread the way all great stories do. In whispers at first, then in louder voices, then in the kind of full-throated telling that happens in diners, in barber shops, and around fires when the night is long and the audience is willing. They told the story of the boy who stepped between a girl and a knife with nothing but a dish rag and his own 2 feet. They told the story of the girl who called an army but commanded it with her conscience. They told the story of the father who knelt before a cleaning lady and chose the law over the river. And they told the story of the night that 200 engines shook a town awake and reminded it what thunder sounds like when it comes to answer courage. Caleb Morrison made a full recovery. He graduated from high school, enrolled in engineering school on the Iron Saints scholarship, and eventually opened his own restoration shop in Billings, specializing in classic American muscle cars and vintage motorcycles. The matte black iron 883 Sportster sat in the front window of his shop for years, polished and gleaming, a reminder he never needed to explain to anyone. The Ford Mustang his father had left behind ran for another 100,000 miles before Caleb finally retired it to the back of the shop. Not because it was broken, but because it had done its job. It had taught him that some things are worth fixing even when the world tells you to give up. Sloan Blackwood finished high school in Ashwood. She graduated valedictorian. She went to college, then law school. She passed the bar on her first attempt. She never wore the leather again, but she kept a photograph of her father in her office next to a framed menu from Riley's Diner, the one with the coffee ring stain and the ketchup smear that might have been ketchup and might have been something else. She specialized in federal prosecution, and in her first year as an assistant district attorney, She helped bring down a corruption ring that spanned 2 states. The USB drive had been the first domino. She made sure it wasn't the last. Detective Cole Harper was among the 19 law enforcement officers indicted in the federal sweep that followed the Graves case. He pleaded guilty to 12 counts of public corruption and was sentenced to 14 years in a federal penitentiary. He never set foot in Ashwood again. Briggs recovered fully from his leg wound. He rode for another 12 years before retiring to a cabin outside Helena with a German shepherd named Gunshot and a view of the mountains that stretched all the way to the horizon. He never talked about the sawmill, but on certain nights when the wind was right and the stars were out, he would sit on his porch and listen to the silence. And he would remember the sound of a 16-year-old girl's voice crackling through a cheap radio, saying the word that saved a dozen lives. Magnus Blackwood continued to lead the Iron Saints for another decade. He never spoke publicly about what happened in Ashwood, but those closest to him noticed a change after that October. He was quieter, more deliberate. He still commanded with authority, but the authority had shifted from the gravity of a man who could destroy to the gravity of a man who chose not to. He visited Ashwood once a year, always in October, always alone. He would park his Road King outside Riley's Diner, which had reopened under new management, with a fresh coat of paint and a working neon sign, and he would sit in the booth where Caleb had served coffee to a girl with storm cloud eyes, and he would drink his coffee black and leave $100 tip on the table. He never explained why to anyone. He didn't need to. Edmund Graves was convicted on 47 federal counts, including money laundering, conspiracy, corruption of public officials, and ordering the attempted murder of a minor. He was sentenced to life without parole. In his sentencing hearing, the judge noted that the evidence against him was among the most comprehensive and cleanly documented he had ever seen. He didn't know that the documentation had been managed by a 16-year-old girl standing in a hospital corridor over 2 disarmed assassins, calmly dictating the chain of evidence to a man with a scar from his ear to his chin. Diane Morrison quit her second job. She didn't need it anymore. She spent her mornings tending a small garden in her backyard and her afternoons volunteering at the hospital where her son had nearly died and been reborn. She never fully understood the world that had descended on her town that October. The chrome and the leather and the men who knelt before her and called her son a hero. But she understood the result. Her boy was alive. Her bills were paid. And a girl named Sloan brought flowers to her kitchen table every Sunday afternoon and called her ma'am, and never once let her forget that Caleb's courage had meant something. They remained close friends for the rest of their lives. Caleb and Sloan bonded by a Tuesday night in October when the world revealed itself in the starkest possible terms: good and evil, courage and cowardice, the choice to stand or the choice to look away. They never became more than friends, though the people of Ashwood speculated endlessly. The truth was simpler and more profound than romance. They were 2 people who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and their most brave. And that kind of seeing creates a bond that doesn't need a name. It just exists, steady and true, like the heartbeat of a cardiac monitor, counting the moments of a life that almost ended, but didn't. The story of Ashwood reminds us of something important. It reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they wear greasy aprons and drive broken-down sedans. Sometimes they are 16-year-old girls who choose the law over the fist, the courtroom over the river, the hard right over the easy wrong. It teaches us that true bravery is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to stand your ground when every nerve in your body is screaming at you to run. And most of all, it reminds us that loyalty, real loyalty, the kind that bleeds and bruises and holds the line, is a currency more valuable than all the gold in the world. And in room 304, where a cardiac monitor once counted the fragile heartbeats of a boy who refused to sit down, the memory of courage lived on. Not in the chrome and thunder that shook the valley, not in the USB drive that brought down an empire, but in the quiet, unshakable truth that one person standing up at the right moment can change everything. The thunder had rolled, the storm had passed, and in its wake, two lives began again, stronger than before, forged in the fire of a single night, when a boy with a dish rag proved that the bravest thing in the world is not the willingness to fight. It is the willingness to stand.